So to get started, I'm just going to make my bow for the top of my wreath first. And I'm starting with this red velvet, and this is a really good quality. And I have that link in my description below from Amazon. So I just want to roll it out as much as I could. Okay, so to make the bow, I'm going to start off by dovetailing my end. And I want to leave about 8 inches of a tail. So we'll squish that right in the middle. And I'm going to make my loop fairly big, probably, let's see, about 5 or 6 inches. And then you're going to want to twist it to the other side. Measure that out to see. Okay. And then I'll cut it again about 8 inches. And just to hold all this together, I'm going to put a pipe cleaner. You can also use wire. And then I'll dovetail the end again. It's a little bit too long. A little bit more off. Okay. So this will be our base bow for the back. And then I'm going to use this burgundy. And this time I'm going to make my bow, my loops a little bit shorter. I have used this ribbon before, so it's a little bit crinkly, but it's okay because I'm going to have other ribbons in front of it. Okay, and then I'll use another piece of pipe cleaner to hold this. I love the combination of all of these together. Like with the plaid, it comes out so pretty. I've used them to make bows for my tree, and they look so good. So for this one, I'm going to make 4 loops. See, my tail, I'm going to make about 5 inches, and then do 4 loops at about 4 inches. And to really set that plaid off, I'm going to make a bow out of this green. So I have 2 greens. Make sure I get the longer one because I want a bigger bow. And then I'm just going to take them and cross them this way and then come in to make my bow. That way it's a little bit easier. You know your tails are going to be the right length. And then I'll just come in and squish it in the middle. And I'm just going to go and I'm going to attach it. I think I want one more green bow. So I'm going to use the rest of this green. And now I'm going to go and attach it to this burgundy. And then I'll undo the burgundy pipe cleaner around it. And then I'm going to put them all together and attach them with a zip tie. So I'm going to take the one off here off as well. Actually, I'm going to leave the one on here, on this one, so that we can tie it to the wreath. Pull it as tight as I can. And now we'll be able to attach it to the top of the wreath. And it's a little flat right now, but we can fluff all that out as we go along. So I'm just going to go here and attach it to the top. And I'm going to attach it to the wire of the frame. And I'm going to have to do this off camera. But I'm just attaching it with the pipe cleaner around that wire frame. And then I just cut off the excess and tucked it behind there. And then for the middle part of it, you can't take one of the branches, like this, and then just fold it over the middle here so that you can kind of hide the pipe cleaner. Okay, and then we'll fluff all that out. I want to take a few of these other ribbons, and I'm going to match them up with a few pieces of the plaid, as well as some of this navy blue. Okay, so I've cut my ribbon into 10-inch pieces, except for the plaid, which I only had a little bit left, so they're about 7 inches. And they'll go on top. So I want to show you the little bundle that I made. I'm going to make 3 of these to put in the 3 lower spots, you know, of the wreath. Okay, so the way I do this is I start out with the red, and this one, find my center, and then I just pinch it. The redder ribbon is a little bit thicker, so you need to pinch it really good to gather it up. Okay, and then I'll take the burgundy and do the same thing, and then one of my navy blue satin ribbons, and then the plaid. And I'm just taking a little bit of piece of a pipe cleaner to attach these. And you can cut your pipe cleaner into pieces. So you just want to hold it together, and then I'm going to wrap a branch around it from the wreath to secure it. So just need to make one more, and then we'll put them on the wreath. Okay, so I'm just going to place them right where I think, let's see, like that. Yeah. Okay, and then I'll just go in and wrap a branch around them. Okay, and then you can flip them out. Okay, so now I'm going to go in with some ornaments and some pine cones. And the way I'm just going to attach them by sticking a pipe cleaner through them and attaching it to one of the branches in the wreath. That way they're detachable. Next year I can take them out and, remake my wreath again. And then you can do the same thing with pine cones if you want to put any more pine cones. So I'm going to put a few. Okay, so I have these pine cones. Well, I bought these. They're pine cone ornaments from Walmart. And they come with a little hanger and a little loop here that the hanger goes through. Well, I painted them gold just to give them some color. And I'm going to cut off the hanger. And I'm going to loop the pipe cleaner through that loop. Like this. So that way I can attach them to my wreath. Okay. And I'm going to do the same to these. And so now I'll just look at my wreath and see where I can place them. And if the pipe cleaners kind of stick out, they're too long, you can see them, you can just cut off any excess that you didn't put around the branch. Okay, so now I'm just going to go in and I'm going to fluff up my bow at the top so that I can decide where I want my other embellishments. Okay, you can see I added one of these blue satin bows to the top. That way it matches with all the other blue in here. And let's see, so next we're going to add in our greenery. And to attach our greenery, if you want to hot glue, you can do that. Or you can just use branches, to secure it in there. And that's what I'm going to do. And you just want to place these, all the way around. You can do it all the way around, or you can just place them around the top portions of your wreath. And I am securing some of these with the branches so that they stay in place. Okay, so then I'm going to go and stick some of these red berries in here. Okay, so I'm going to finish up all these embellishments and then I'll hang it up on my door and show you the finished product. Okay, so here we are. You can see I put some mesh all the way around the outside of the wreath. I wanted to make it look a little bit larger. And so all I did was make some loops, 10-inch loops, and then I connected it with a branch. And I went all the way around that way. And then I added this deer. And I got this deer from the Dollar Tree. And it was like a silvery glitter color. And I just painted over it with some antique gold paint. Okay, so then I add a little bit more of the ornaments on here and some magnolia leaves. And I had painted the magnolia leaves gold also. So I left some of them green. Okay, so to make our pot holders, you're going to need a template, a Christmas tree template. And I've cut this out of some cardboard, and I'll show you how I did that when we get to that step. And you'll need lots of festive Christmas fabrics in whatever color scheme that you like. I like these, like a dark red or cranberry color with some green. And I purchased this fabric from Amazon. It's a fat quarter bundle, and I'll put a link to that in my description below. And so we're going to use this particular fabric I got from Walmart. It's just a fat quarter. And I'm going to pair that with this. And you'll need some white for your background and perhaps another solid color like a green. And I also have a little bit of this brown that I'm going to use for the tree trunk. Okay, so I'm going to put this all aside for now, and then I'll show you how I made my template. Okay, so for my template, I just took a piece of thin cardboard. I think it was in like a package of something that I bought. I'm not sure exactly. Or it might have been in a picture frame. So it's really thin. But if you have some template plastic that you want to use, you can use that. Anything that has a little bit of, some sturdiness to it. So all I did was I measured it, the bottom where it was nice and straight, at 5 inches. So I just took and marked where the 5-inch marks were here. And then I went in the middle to 2.5 inches, and I went up to about 7.5 to 7 3/4 of an inch. And I marked it up here at the point. And then I just took my ruler and I went from that 5-inch down here up to this mark, and I just traced it out. And I did the same thing on the other side, and then I cut it out into this piece. So this is to help us cut out our tree once we have it all sewn together. Okay, so the next step we're going to do is take all of our Christmas fabric and we're going to make strips of them. So I'm going to cut them about 6 inches long so that they're not too long, because the bottom of our tree is only 5 inches. And I'm going to cut them at 1.5 inches. So just open up your fabric. And this is a piece of scrap that I had used from another project. And then I'll just take my ruler and I'm going to cut that at 1.5 inches wide. And so I'm going to cut several of these. And I want to use the darker colors and then the lighter colors, and I'm going to alternate them. So I'll go ahead and cut green. And so I'll keep doing that with several, and you can make different variations of, how you stack them up. But I'm going to cut the rest of the strips out, and then I'll put them together in a row so I can show you how I'm going to sew those. So I've cut each of my 6-inch strips by 1.5 inches, and I'm just stacking them on top of each other like this, and I'm going to go to the machine and I'm going to sew a scant 1/4 inch seam on each one of these, sewing them all together so that when I'm finished, it should equal to about the same height as my template, so I can use it to cut out my tree. So I've sewn all my strips together, and then I took it and I ironed it all with the seams open so that it would stay flatter. Okay, and then now we can just take our template and cut out our Christmas tree. So I'm just going to set, because I want all these presents to show on the bottom, I'm going to place it even with the bottom. I'm just going to hold on to that, and I'm going to put my ruler on top of it so that I'm trying not to get the cardboard in my rotary cutter. Now, here is our tree. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is cut out a couple little pieces. These are 1 by 1.5, and you can use either one. Like if you want to use a green for the trunk, you can do that, or if you want to use the brown because it looks more like a wood color, you can use that. Okay, and so the next thing we're going to do is applique these onto our background. And so I cut a background piece of white that is a 9-inch square. And so I'm going to take my tree and decide where I need it to be. And I'll take my trunk, and I want to make sure I get the trunk right in the middle. So it'll be about right here. And for the trunk, I'm going to put a little bit of glue from just the ordinary glue stick. and then flip this over and glue the top of here of this down over my tree trunk, just like that. I want to make sure that I leave a little bit of room on the top and the bottom for, you know, any binding that we're going to put around it. Okay, so I've glued my tree down with some school glue, and so if you want to, you can put a star on the top. Like I fussy cutted this little star from my fabric, and you can glue that down on top of here as well if you want. Just leave a you'll just want to leave 1/2 inch fabric on from the top of it and the bottom. But I think I'm just going to leave the star off. I like it better without the star. Okay, now so I've sewn my blanket stitch all the way around my tree, and my tree top is ready. So I'm going to set this aside because I'm going to make a wreath. So what I've done is I've cut wedges from a Dresden template. Now I can't find my my Dresden ruler. I've misplaced it, but I did make me a little template. And what you'll do is, if you have the Dresden ruler, you'll want to use a 3-inch. You'll go up to the 3-inch mark and cut out your wedges like this. So what I did was I just made me one out of some cardboard that is 3 inches tall, and then I cut all my little wedges out, and I've already sewn them. And you'll take it to the machine, each of your wedges, and you'll fold them right sides together and sew your 1/4 inch seam across the top, and you'll do that to all of them. And then I take my scissors, and you can see I've already cut this one, but you cut it just close to like about 1/8 of an inch from that seam line on that corner, so that when you turn it out, it's going to be a little bit easier to turn out. And so I'll just open up these seams right here. I kind of mash them with my finger press them, and then turn out my wedge, and I'll use my little tool to make my point. Now I'll have a link in my description on where you can get the Dresden ruler, and it comes with this little wooden turner that helps you to get really good points here, like that. And then I just put them all in a row the way I want them to look whenever I sew them together. I'm just doing like 2 greens and then the red, 2 greens, red, you know, in between like this, because I want it to be mainly green considering it's a wreath. And so I've got 16 of these, and I think you can take anywhere between 15 or 16 of them. So now you'll just take it to the machine and you'll start pairing them together. And sew your 1/4 inch seam down the sides, like that. And I usually do like half of them, and then I'll stop and I'll do the other half together, and then put the 2 halves together. So I'm going to sew these up, and then I'll show you what to do next. So it did take 15 of these little blades sewn together to make our little Dresden plate. Now I'm going to do something different with this. I'm not going to put it on the background just like it is. I'm going to make it look more like a wreath. So I'm going to fold it in half, and I want to cut about 3/8 of an inch all the way around. So I'm going to make sure that my circle comes together evenly. I'm going to take my scissors, cut about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch off, just following along that curve of the circle. You can see that makes it shorter. Now I'm going to turn these over so that I can get a hem. And I'm going to make it a little bit easier by putting some of my glue stick down along these edges. And I've already, as you can see, I did iron it. So So now I'm just going to turn it over about 1/4 of an inch. And this is going to keep this secure so that when I go to the sewing machine, it won't come up. You can put a couple of clips in if you need to, just to hold down some of these spots so that the glue will dry. Okay, so that when you turn it over, everything will be nice and hemmed. And so then, after it dries a little bit, I'll put it on my background. You want to fold that one in half so you can get your center. You want to get your center on the ends and in the middle. And then fold it over again to make sure that you're getting your center on the other side. I'm just kind of finger pressing it. That way, whenever we go to place our dress, and we can see where our center is in order to place the wreath. Okay, should be about center. And now I'll just glue this down with my glue stick. And then I'm going to go to the machine and I'm going to sew a blanket stitch around the entire thing again and around the entire middle to give us our wreath. Okay, so I'll do that. And then we'll layer everything together to make our potholders. Okay, so I've sewn my decorative stitch around my wreath and around the inside of the circle. And I've already put the layers together for this one, but I'm going to show you how I did that with the other one. And I basted it already. So I've got this one ready. And the back of this one, I'm doing a solid green. Okay. So I'll put this one to the side. And for the tree, I'm doing this cranberry backing. And then for my layers, what I've done is I have 2 pieces of 100% cotton batting. And the batting that I'm using is this Wrap and Zap batting because I know it's 100% cotton and it's great for any kind of heat. So the way I'm doing this is I'm layering my backing piece, then a piece of the Wrap and Zap, and then next I'm going to lay a piece of Insul Bright. Now you don't have to put the Insul Bright if you don't want to. You can just put 2 or 3 layers of the batting so that you make sure that your hands will be safe whenever you use your pot holder. Or you can use, like I'm doing, put a layer of Insul Bright in the middle, and I've cut it the same size as my top because I was a little bit low on my supply, so I wanted to make sure that I did get a piece in there. And then I'm going to put another layer of the cotton batting on top of that, and then my top. Okay, and this is going to be thick, but it's going to, be well insulated so that you won't burn your hands whenever you go to remove anything from the oven. Okay, and these are a little bit bigger than a normal pot holder. I wanted mine to be a little bit larger. So instead of like a, 6-inch pot holder that you might get in the store, once you put the binding and everything around it, it would probably be somewhere around 8 inches for the finished product. Okay, so I have all my layers ready. And then I'm going to go ahead and baste this. And I'm just basting it with some of these curved quilting safety pins. And just going through all the layers. Lift it up just a little bit. And you don't really need many of these whenever you're quilting. But you can put as many as you need, to secure it. And if you're interested in these quilting safety pins, I'm going to put a link for that in the description below. So now I'm going to go to the machine and I'm going to quilt these up. And to do that, you can do any kind of quilting pattern you want. If you want to do an all over, you can do that. You can do grids or a crosshatch. Now, I think I'm just going to follow along the edge of this tree so that my tree kind of pops out. And then I might go over where these seams would meet in between each of these stripes. And then I'll do probably like a cross hatch or something for the rest of it. Okay, and then on the wreath, I'll do the same thing. I'll go and stitch all the way around here and around the outside of the wreath so that it kind of pops. And then I'll do some straight, quilting for the rest of the white. And then for my background, I'm going to use a matching green or a black you could probably use for this, for the back. And then I'll use burgundy for the back of this one for your bobbin thread. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll get to the next step. So now that I've quilted my potholders, and I quilted the other one too, and I'll show you that in a little bit. But this one is all ready for me to bind it. And so for the binding, all I did was I took the fabric that I wanted to use for my binding, and since I'm using fat quarters, I cut them about 3 sections, 3 strips of 2.5 inches, and one is shorter than the other. But I sewed them end to end like this, and then I ironed them flat, with the seams open. And then I ironed it in half, and now we've got it all ready to go. So my strip is about 54 inches. It's longer than what I need, but I needed to make sure I have some extra so that we can join the 2 ends after we bind it all the way around. Okay, so now all I need to do is, see, I'm going to figure out which is my top, so that we can put our hanger. Now for our hanger, I just cut a 5-inch piece of fabric by 2 inches, and then I folded it in half and ironed it, and then I ironed those 2 sides towards the middle crease like this, and it's about a 1/2 inch wide after you do that. And so then I'll just need to take it to the machine, and I'm going to top stitch it on both sides. Okay, then I wanted to show you how I'm going to place it on here whenever I do my binding. So for the binding, you're just going to take your piece, you're going to start your binding about halfway down one side. You want to leave this about 5 or 6 inches loose here so that you can join the 2 ends. Oh, and I've got it backwards. Let's see. The raw edge should be facing this raw edge. Okay, so I'll just stick a clip right where I want to start to sew. So I'll just sew it this way, and then when I get to a corner, you just want to take your machine. Once you get to about 1/4 of an inch away from the corner, I stop, okay, and then I pivot and I sew off that corner of my stitch, so that whenever I go to make the corner, you're going to turn it like this and then fold it back over, and then I start again right down that side. And you'll do that on all the corners until you get to the section where you want to do your top. So when you get to the top left corner, you want to take your holder, and you're going to want to make sure before you get this top part sewn, you're going to place your holder strap about 1/2 inch from the end of the corner here. And I'll just let it stick out just a little bit, and I can cut that off later. I just want to make sure that it does get in there and get sewn. And then once you do that and you start to turn your corner, you'll take your strap and you'll twist it over, and you'll put it 1/2 inch from the corner this way, so that whenever you are finished with your binding and you fold your binding over to the front, you're going to have that strap in there already sewn, and you'll have your little holder. And I can show you when I get to the machine. I'll put that on camera so that you can see how I do that. Okay, so I'm going to go and sew this one up, and then I'll show you both of the pot holders. Okay, I wanted to show you how I'm putting on my the little hanger. What I did was on the next, see, I'm at the corner of the top left corner of the pot holder, but I'm, on the back, and I pinned it about 1/2 inch from the top, and then 1/2 inch from the side, and I just kind of twisted it a little bit. Hope you can see that good, so that it's right underneath here, and then I just pin that with a clip. So I'm going to go over this one on the side first, and I'll do that real quick. And when I get to about 1/4 inch from my corner is when I will sew off that corner. Cut my thread, and then I'm going to turn this back and then back again to make our corner miter. Let's see. Then I will clip a little further down from where that is so that I can make sure I go over this corner. And sew 1/4 inch seam down this way, going over where I placed my hanger. Down a little bit more, then back up, cut that off right there, and then now we can put our two ends together. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come down here and I'm going to cut about 2.5 inches, which is the width of our binding. Cut that piece off, and then I'm going to pull this bottom one up, and I'm going to cut it about 2 inches, down to 2 inches. Oh, let's see if I move my hand. You see 2 inches here and about 2.5 here. So how I'm going to do this is this top one, I'm going to open it up and I'm going to fold about 1/2 inch or so in to make a hem, or 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch. So that you don't have raw edges here. And then I'm going to take this other piece and I'm going to tuck that inside that top piece. But first I'm going to cut it a little bit more so that it's not as thick and bulky. Just cut it longer first, before that, so that I made sure that I had enough. Now I'm just tucking it in that top one like this. And so then I'll just go ahead and back up a little bit and then continue to sew that whole side. Okay, so I'll show you right here where I sewed our hanger. You just flip all of your binding around to the front, and then you're going to go and pull that all over to the front, and then turn that corner back in like this to make your miter. Stick a pin in it. So now I'm going to go and sew all this down, and you can sew a straight stitch about 1/8 inch from the edge, or you can sew a decorative stitch. And I'm going to sew a decorative stitch. I'm going to use a blanket stitch like I used around my wreath on the binding. Okay, so here we are, the big reveal. These two Christmas pot holders turned out so cute. And don't forget, you can also use these appliques for other items too for your Christmas decor, like this. This one, I put it on a plain white kitchen towel so that it matches the other two pot holders. So cute. And you can even put the wreath one on there too if you want to. You can make them smaller, like a 2-inch size instead of 3, so that you could put your wreath on your towel. Okay, so for your first step, you want to start by measuring your existing pillow on your couch and measure the width and the height, then add another inch for your seam allowance. And then from there, we're going to start to cut out our other pieces. So the next thing we'll do is measure out our main panel of the front, our backing piece. And so if all that you want to do is just to cover it, you can just cut out your fabric 22. Well, if your existing pillow is 22 inches, then all you need to do is cut out a panel of 23 inches for the front. And it could be any fabric that you want. But for me, mine measures out 22 inches. I'm going to cut out just a main white background fabric, and it's 13 inches square. And then I'm going to add sashes around each of the sides. And my sashes are 22 by 4.5 inches. So, but I did that so that I can embellish the front of my main panel. And you can use a low volume background if you want, or any Christmas fabric that you want. I'm going to use the white because I'm going to add to it a Christmas tree that I made like this. And all I did was took strips of leftover fabric and I sewed them together, and then I cut out a triangle in the shape of a tree, and then I added this little piece at the bottom for my trunk, and I just glued that with a glue stick. And now I'm going to use my glue stick and I'm going to center this tree on the main panel and glue it down. And then I will take it to my machine and I'm going to sew a blanket stitch around the whole thing to hold it in place. So I'm just taking my glue stick and adding glue to the back of my tree. And then I'm going to press it down. And then I will go this way and add some more glue. Now for this tree, I've used a piece of ribbon, or a couple pieces of red ribbon, because it was velvet and I like the look of it. So now I'll just take it, make sure I lay it flat and press it down. And add glue to my trunk. Make sure my corners are done. And that way when I go around it with the thread, it's going to stay in place. Okay, I'm going to sew this up. Okay, so I sewed a blanket stitch all the way around my tree. And I've got the top part of my sash ready to go. I sewed the side sashes, and all we have to do is cut off this excess of the side sash even with the bottom, and then we will do the same thing I've done to the top and put on the top and the bottom sash. And you're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam across, and that'll give us the top of our pillow. Okay, so now we have our top done. We can start to add the backing of our pillow. And I'm using a satin table runner. And I just cut it to the same size. And my runner is like 12 inches wide. So you're going to place it right sides together, and then you'll do the same with the other piece, and it's going to overlap a little bit, and that's good. You want it to overlap, and then you can pin it all the way around or use some clips, and I'm going to sew it all the way around, and then we'll turn it inside out by just opening up the envelope here and then turning it right side out. And just like that, we have a Christmas pillow cover that completely changes the look of your sofa. And for another great idea, you can tie the table runners around a pillow as well and make a bow, like I did here with my navy blue pillows. So the supplies you're going to need to make this project are some kitchen hand towels or Bora mop towels. These are from Walmart. They're very inexpensive. I got like, I think 6 of them in this package for, I want to say it was less than $8. You can also find these on Amazon, and I'll put a link in the description below where you can find them. Okay, so you're also going to need some scraps. Now, these are a few of the Christmas scraps that I'm using. And I also have a link for these, this fat quarter bundle. I'll put that in my description below as well. It's really cute fabric. And these fabrics are from Walmart, and it's a fall harvest fat quarter bundle. Those are really good too. And so today I'm going to demonstrate how to make this with the fall fabric. So all you're going to need one of these towels. Put the rest aside. I'm going to cut the fabric that I need for each of these hand towels. Also, I'll have the measurements in the description below so that you can refer back to that. So the first thing we need to do with our hand towels measure 16 by 19 inches. And it's got a nice little, like a terry cloth texture. Now you can use plain if you don't like the terry cloth. You can also use the plain ones. And so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to fold my towel in half lengthwise, because we're going to cut off the first 5 inches of our towel. And you don't have to do that. If you want it to be really long, you can leave it long. I just prefer it to be a little bit shorter, because the top part is going to be long, and it's going to take up the same, it's going to be about the same length once you put that top section on here. So I like to cut off some of the length. So I'm just going to cut off 5 inches. Okay, and then I'll save this for another project, because I like to make dishcloths with these. Okay, so now that we have that, it'll measure out, it'll still be like 16 by 14. So I'm going to set this aside for the moment. So for our next piece, this is about 18 inches off of a fat quarter. So what I'm doing here is folded it lengthwise. So I'm going to cut this one at 11 inches in length. Okay, and then I'll open it up. I'm going to measure in the other direction, and you can double it just to save time. In this direction, I'm going to cut it at 10 inches. Okay, so once you do that, you want to open it back up and fold it back lengthwise to the 11 inch. This is going to be our top band of our towel. Okay, so the next section that you need to cut, and I've already cut it out, let's see, is a 2-inch by 17-inch strip of fabric. Now my strip is like 17 and a half. If you're going to cut it on the 18-inch long, of a fat quarter, you know, it'll be 18 by 2 inches, which is fine. If there's a couple, you know, inches longer than what you need, that's fine too. The reason you need 17 inches is because your towel is 16 across, and you want that extra of the other inch in order to fold a hem on the ends. So right at 17 should be just enough to fold it in about 1/4 of an inch, or maybe 3/8 of an inch. It'll give you plenty of room to do that. And then you can cut it down, like I said, if you need to. So you'll need that strip, and that's for the lower part of your towel. It's a band that's going to be a decorative band across the bottom. Okay, and so for the next, this is going to go along with your band, is 2 strips of, these are 22s. I cut it across the other section of a fat quarter. But you want 2 bands of 1 1/4 inch to go on either side of this band. So you want to cut those down to 17 as well. So I'm going to cut those down. And then for the top of your band, for the trim here, you'll need another 2 bands like these. Yeah. You're going to cut those at 11 inches as well to go across the bottom of your top band, which will be on your, it'll show on the front of your towel and on the back of your towel. Okay, like I have a piece here. These are thinner. See, these are 1 inch. You're going to want to cut it at 2 inches wide for your top, because you're going to fold those over, and you'll have about a 1 inch exposed, or 3/4 of an inch exposed. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to sew the bottom band, so we can sew that onto our towel first. So I'm going to go to the machine and I'm going to sew these onto the top and the bottom of our band. Okay, so I've ironed my piece for the band on the bottom flat, but now we're going to turn it over and we're going to make a hem. So you just want to fold it up. Now it depends on how wide you want your hem. You can do it wider, you know, fold it under like 1/4 of an inch, or you can fold it over 3/8 of an inch. I'm going to fold it up about 3/8 because I want it to go right to where it meets the sewn line where I sewed it before, where we attached the bands. So I'm just going to fold it up as evenly as I can, and then I'm going to iron it down. Okay, and then when you flip it, you can see where it's all nice and hemmed. Okay, and so then I'll do the other side. Okay, and then I'll flip it over and check it out, make sure it's even. If it's not even, you can go back and just kind of open it up a little bit more and then re-iron it. And so I did the same thing already here at the top, where I folded over my hem, and I wanted the top trim to be a little bit wider. So it's about like 3/4 of an inch to 1 inch. And then I'll just set that one aside for now. Okay, and so on one end, I'm going to take this, because this I know is longer than my towel. So first I just want to take one end and turn it over about 1/4 of an inch. And I'm going to iron that down. Flip it, iron it on the other side. Okay, so now I'll grab my towel and I'm going to line it up on the bottom, but we want to do it like 3 inches from the bottom. So to make sure that I have it exactly at 3 inches, I'm going to take my ruler and just measure to make sure. And then you can also take a marking pen, like a water soluble pen, and then I'll just mark right there underneath with it, where it's at 3 inches, just so that I know when I'm placing it on here that I'm lining it up correctly. Take my ruler and make sure I have 3 inches on this side, and then again in the middle, and then you can also mark it in the middle. I'm just doing it right under the edge here so that I know that that's my line, and then you can cover it up whenever you put it on here. And then since this is a water soluble marker, it's going to wash out when you wash it. Or you can take a little bit of water and wash that. Okay, so I think I've got it lined up pretty good. I'm going to put a couple of clips in the end. And then that way I can go down here and flip this edge over so that I can hem it, make a hem, making sure that it's nice and even. And then I'll pull it back and I'm going to iron that down. Okay, so now I can place my clips here on this end. So now all we need to do is sew our top stitching. I'm going to sew a top stitch right here in the ditch between the 2 different fabrics. And I'm going to do the same on this side. And then I'll go and I'll sew 1/8 of an inch along the edges here on both the top and the bottom. And then I'm going to go right here on the edge and I'm going to sew a top stitch about 1/8 of an inch along this edge on both sides. Okay, so that will attach our band to our towel. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll meet you back here so we can start the top. Okay, so I've sewn down the band, and I think it came out pretty good. I love this fabric. I hope you can see this really well on camera because in person it is really beautiful fabric. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is work on the top of our towel, and we just need to fold it in half and find that center line. And I'm going to take a clip, and right in here I'm going to stick this clip so that I know right there is where my center is. And then I'll open it up. Okay, so what we want to do now is go from the center here is on the right of my clip, and take that clip back out, and then I'm going to fold it over and turn it. I'm going to make a pleat right there in the center. And then I'll put that clip back. Okay, and so from here, we want to start pleating from the outside in, and we're going to reduce the size up at the top to 10 inches by our pleats. So I'm just going to, the way I did it on my other towel that I'll show you in a little bit, is I just made like 2 more pleats on each side. And all I'm doing is just turning it in about 3/4 of an inch. And then I clip it. And then I'll do another one here. and clip it again. Okay, and then I'm going to go to the other side, and I'm going to make another one, and then make my last one, and then clip that. Okay, so now I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to measure and make sure, see how long it is. Okay, and what I'm doing is I'm trying to, because it's going to naturally kind of point up like this, but you want it to come out as straight as you can so that you can measure and make sure that you have 10 inches. Well, I've got 9 inches, so I'll need to let out some of my pleats a little bit, just a little too large. I think this one is a little bit large. Okay, and I'll measure it again, and that's right at 10. Okay, so that's what you want to do. You want to make sure that it's 10 inches across here. Okay, then I'll set that aside, and I'm going to take this to the machine, and I'm going to sew across each of these pleats so that they stay together before I put the top on. Okay, so I've sewn across each of the pleats, and I just went down about 1/4 of an inch, or maybe a little more than 1/4 of an inch over each pleat. And I also, when I went over them, I went backwards over them as well, just to secure it. Okay, and so now our top, what we're going to do is we're going to lay this right in here between the folds of the top of our, the top band of our towel, just like this. So you'll want to, let's see. Well, before we do that, we need to hem the sides. So we'll need to turn the sides in, and I'm going to iron them because it makes them stay a little bit better. So I'm just going to turn it in about 1/4 of an inch, and then I'll iron these down. And I also wanted to show you, whenever you're folding your hems over like this, you might get a little bit of extra where it would show on the edge here, and I just take my little scissors and I'll cut that corner so that when you fold it over, that corner's not sticking out. Just cut a little bit like that, just a little tad, little snip, and then whenever you're turning it over, it's not going to stick out. And I'll do the same on this side. So you can see where it would kind of stick out. Just a little tiny snip. Okay, so I've got that one, and then I'm going to fold it over. So I want to do one side at a time when I'm hemming, because I want to make sure that when you put your top section on over, you want to line this up with the edge here of your towel, like this. And then you can place a clip. And also, if it's helpful for you, you can take some glue, just a school glue stick, and I'll just dab a little bit here, and that way it'll hold down this hem in place over the towel. And again, this is washable, so it'll wash out when you wash your towel. And it'll hold it down really well, so when you go to your machine and hem it up, it's going to stay in place and you don't have to worry about it shifting on you. Okay, so for this side, I'm marking where I need to turn my hem over so that it will match with this side of the seam. And I'm going to put a clip right there so I'll know exactly the amount that I need to fold it under. I'm going to do the same thing right here. Okay, so now I can move this out of the way, and then I'm going to iron this hem over. Okay, so now we have that one ironed. Now we can lay out our top. So I'm just going to come in and put it right where the band will go over where I sewed over those pleats, because you don't want that to show. Make sure these line up. You may have to, adjust it a few times just to make sure that it's all nice and even. And then you can go in and put some straight pins to hold it. Or like I say, you can put some glue. I'm going to just put glue. Okay. And then I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to do the same thing on the back to make sure that it's even with the front. Now I'm going to take it to my machine and I'm going to sew again right here in the ditch between the two fabrics, and then again on the edge I'll sew it about 1/8 of an inch or a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch on the edge. And then we're going to take it and sew it from the ends here all the way to the top. So we're going to top stitch this. And then when I'm done, I'll meet you right back here. Okay, so I've finished putting the band on the top, and I put 2 lines down here of top stitching. I just like the look of it. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do, we're going to sew up about 1/2 inch from this fabric, and we're going to sew 4 lines about 1/4 of an inch apart all across here. And you want to use your long stitching like a 5.0 or 6.0, so that we're going to pull these threads and we're going to pleat the top. So you're going to want to make sure that your threads are long. You're going to want to pull up your thread from the bottom when you start, and make sure those 2 threads are pretty long so you can pull on them on both sides when you finish and when you start on each of those lines. Okay, so I'm going to pull up my bottom thread by just holding on to my top thread and turning your wheel of your sewing machine till you can grab that bottom thread. And sometimes I have to take off my foot so I can see that thread, but there we go. And I'm pulling it up. Okay, so I've got it probably about 10 inches long, and I'm going to swing that over to the back, and then I will start to sew my lines. So I'm going to go about 1/2 inch from the bottom, and then I will start to sew. Okay, so when I get to the end, instead of hitting my cutting button, which I'm very used to doing, I'm just going to pull this and pull it out until I get about another 10 inches, and then I'm going to cut it. Pull those to the back, and then I'll start my next line. And I'm doing these about 1/4 of an inch away from each other. Okay, and then I'll sew these next 2 lines, and then I'll show you what to do next. So I've sewn each of my 4 lines, and I've separated the top threads with the bottom threads because we're going to pull all the bottom threads to make our ruffle. So I'm just going to start by doing that. I've got all of them at one time, at the same time, and we're going to pull it. I'm just going to keep pulling. You see it starting to ravel, to gather, I mean. Okay. Okay, and then I'm going to pull some of it towards the middle, and then I'll pull on the back threads again, and you're just going to keep going until you gather at least halfway from this side, and then you'll go to the other side, and you'll do the same thing. You'll separate the bottom threads from the top. Sometimes it's kind of hard to do that. Okay. And you're going to go and separate each one of these threads, and then you'll pull and gather towards the center. Okay, so you'll just gather it until you're happy with what, the width of it and how it looks. If you want it to be a little bit more, closer together, you can do that. I'm just trying to make them like all even. Okay. So once you have that all gathered in, then you'll take each of your ties on the edges, and then from each of the 4 rows, you're going to take the top and the bottom and make sure they're separate. And then I'll just go in there and I'll tie them. And I'll go through the string like 2 or 3 times and tie it in a knot. Okay, and then you take your scissors and cut that one off. And you'll do that to each of your rows on both sides. Okay, so I'm going to finish this up, and then I will show you what the final step is. Okay, so I've tied off all of our strings, and now our ruffled top is all done. So now all we have to do is to make our tab for the back. And with this, I'm just going to use this dark green fabric, and you can use any kind of matching fabric to your top because it's not going to really show because it'll be on the back. And what I've done is cut a 2-inch by 8-inch piece of fabric, and I'm going to fold it right sides together, and then I'm going to flip up the 2 ends. You want your tab to, once it's all sewn and flipped out, it should be about 3.5 inches long. And I find that that's just, right about the right size, the right length, depending on how thick of a bar you're going to hang your towel on. Okay, so I'm just going to flip these back like this because I want to make sure there's a hem at the end. And I'm going to sew 1/4 of an inch on each side. and then I'm going to flip it out. Okay, and then once I flip it around, then I'm going to top stitch it all the way around, and that'll close this end as well. Okay. Okay, I've sewed my tab, and all I have to do is turn this around, and then I'm going to sew it to the top of this, around this top line. So you want to go right about 1/8 of an inch, and then so that it lines up with that top line on the back. And then we'll come back and we'll put in our Velcro. Okay, so I've sewn the flap to the back in the center, and now all I need to do is place my Velcro, and what I'm using is this Velcro for fabrics. It'll stick on and be permanent, and so you can still wash this once you, you know, however many times you need to wash it, and it'll still stay sticky. Okay, and so I'm just going to cut a piece that is, let's see, about 1 inch. Okay, and so all you gotta do is peel it. I want to put the more rougher side down on here, so I'm going to peel the top side and stick it to the bottom of the flap. You just press it really hard for a minute. It sticks really well. And the instructions say to wait about 24 hours before you hang it to make sure that the glue sticks really well to your fabric. So I'm going to put it to where it's even on this orange flap. And just press it down. See, and this will give you plenty of room here to hang on an oven or like a dishwasher door handle, or even a cabinet handle that is horizontal. But if you want to hang this on a cabinet or bar that is vertical, all you have to do is just take your tab and sew it across here so that it's to the side rather than up and down. So you can do this either way. Okay, so here is the fall version, and here is my Christmas version. Now I'm going to hang these up so that you can see them. So you have the tab on the back of the Christmas version as well. So now your kitchen is ready for the season. You've got 2 adorable hanging kitchen towels ready for Christmas and for fall, or it'll make a perfect gift for any of your friends or family. Drop me a note in the comments below and let me know which one of these you like best. Don't forget to like and share and subscribe to my channel for more creative sewing ideas coming soon. I've got lots coming up for the holiday season, so you won't want to miss that.